a go-getter, someone who's driven, they like the grind, they like the tactics, but realistically, you could run really fast in the wrong direction, and then you're just going to have to turn around and run back. So they're go-getters, but they have a growth mentality that they want to learn from others. They want the peer-to-peer support. They want growth. They don't just have grit, they have the growth mindset.
You're listening to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Riechman.
Welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap. I'm Dustin Riechman, and I'm super grateful today to be joined by a good friend, Ben Albert. And so I always like to open with, how do I know these people, right? So Ben, we actually had to talk a little bit about this in our origin story, but I believe we just connected pretty much organically through LinkedIn. And it was like December 2022, Ben sent me a message. I looked it up and was just asking me about podcast guesting. And ironically, I sent him back an episode that I had just released with Digital Marketer and with Mark DeGrasse. And it turned out that episode was super pivotal in my entrepreneurial journey. And I'll let Ben share his side of this. But that podcast and that relationship got me to Traffic and Conversion Summit, where I spoke in Las Vegas. And so did Ben in January of this year. And then last week, I was in the room with Ryan Dice from Digital Marketer at their marketing mastermind in Austin, Texas. Again, totally because I was on that podcast at that guesting opportunity, and that's the one I shared with Ben. And Ben and I met in Vegas in person at that event. So Ben, I don't want to steal all your thunder, so I'll let you introduce yourself, and then maybe a little sidebar on your relationship with Digital Marketer, because you shared something pretty funny with me before we recorded.
Yeah, man. Well, first off, this is your show, so take all the time you want. Your viewers show up time and time again. The listeners come for you. So I'm honored to be here, Dustin. It really is funny, and I'll go straight into a tactic here. I don't like to waste time. If I'm consuming content, I'm like, how am I going to get the most out of this experience? So a lot of times I take notes. That's if I really feel like an overachiever. But virtually every time I consume a piece of content, we're talking a YouTube video, a podcast, a book, I'm going to reach out to the creator. Now, for a podcast, I don't reach out every single episode because I look like a stalker and it's too much. But I reach out to every guest. So there's a lot of podcasts in my rotation, and every time I listen to an episode, I have a guest I've never experienced before. So do this for me, a little plug to do this so we can connect. But I reached out to Dustin. I can't even remember what podcast it was, but you guested on a show, and I did what I do. I reach out and I say, hey, Dustin, appreciate the insight you brought. XYZ. Sometimes it's a simple connection request and I forget to even write a DM, but it leads to discussion. And you sent me that Digital Marketer podcast. I'm a faculty. You mentioned that. I didn't even know what Digital Marketer was, which is crazy because they're certifying every marketer. They're second to HubSpot and badassery, but I hadn't heard of Digital Marketer, and it led to me listening to that show, reaching out to the host, again, reach out to the guest and the host. And then I was a guest on Digital Marketer with Mark DeGrasse, led into meeting you at the summit, speaking at the summit. And again, I'm just kind of putting an exclamation point on what you just said. It was me listening to a show and just sending a quick connection request and asking you a quick question that led to friendships, speaking opportunities, and now sharing the stage on your show, which is
and I've been on your
and
show.
you're on my show. You're on my show, Real Business Connections. So Real Business Connections, Dustin, look it up, and you'll find that interview as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really fun to reflect on that and just think, what's happened over 14 months or something, right? And what I profess very often, because I run groups and do coaching around podcast guesting very strategically and leveraging all those opportunities, which is kind of like my side of this story, right? I purposely got on Digital Marketer. I was a huge fan. I knew them and I wanted that relationship, and it's led to really cool things. And then on your side of this equation, you were just quote unquote but you were a listener. You didn't even have the cadre of being hey, I was on this show. You're a listener, yet you proactively when you hear a great episode, you proactively reach out to the host and the guests and thank them and start a conversation. Like, that's pretty badass. Like, that's pretty
It's a
ninja.
piggyback.
And it doesn't probably take that much time, right? And you've got a sincere thing to reach out to them, because you literally, like in my world, you have to necessarily listen to every episode, but if you're already listening to an episode, why not take 5 minutes and thank them and compliment them on something they shared? And it might create just like a super great virtual or virtuous relationship, which I know is a big part of what, obviously your podcast is called Real Business Connections. So I think you and I relate in a big way because we're so relational and intentional about growing our network and getting to know other entrepreneurs and getting to know other interesting people. So with that setup, Ben, why don't we start like a snapshot of today? Like, just tell us about your business, who you serve, what you do, obviously your podcast, and then we'll kind of go back and kind of maybe unpack a little bit why and how you got to this point, and then we'll go forward and we'll talk about where you're headed with it. But like, just right now, what do you do? Who do you serve? What's your business like?
So I've got 3 segments of my business. I'll make it super simple. Everything I do is based around a simple concept: getting the wisdom, the knowledge, the service offerings, the help from the people who have it to the people who are looking for it. I'm a bridge to get the wisdom from the people who have it to the people who need it. Now, how? That plays in a lot of forms. That plays in just conversations and making introductions and sending emails and text messages. But Real Business Connections podcast is a free tool to get that. I listen to a lot of shows, I meet a lot of people. It's to take the best, wisest, brilliant people and give them a platform to reach more people. Grow Getters Only is my community where we have free events open to the public and exclusive events for mastermind members, so we can share that knowledge and have that peer-to-peer support. And thirdly, Albert Marketing is the marketing firm itself, and that's actually what makes me the big bucks. I don't know if I'd call it big bucks, but I did replace my sales executive income as an entrepreneur in about a year through this just sharing knowledge and connecting. Albert Marketing is getting the service offerings by generally service-based businesses to their new clients. So no matter what I do, is I see a good thing, I want to inject steroids into it. I want to amplify it. I came from the music industry. We quite literally would amplify musicians. And it's taking a good thing and finding a way to spread it to as many people as possible.
I love that. So you build bridges and you amplify the best things that you find, basically, right? And so
I've
you
got
can do
lots
that
of
through
metaphors if you want more.
yeah, lots of metaphors. I'm sure you're the king of metaphors. So really 3 things: the podcast, which everyone knows what a podcast is. It's similar to what I'm doing here, but with a little bit different intent behind it. Mm-hmm. And then, is it Grow Getters? Did I get that right on the mastermind and the free community?
That's correct. Grow Getters Only.
Tell us a little more about that, because I think most of us know what marketing agencies do. We're all very familiar with podcasts, but I'm pretty interested to unpack a little more about Grow Getters.
Yeah, I mean, I like to invent words. So Grow Getters is a go-getter, someone who's driven. They like the grind. They like the tactics. But realistically, you could run really fast in the wrong direction, and then you're just going to have to turn around and run back. So they're go-getters, but they have a growth mentality that they want to learn from others. They want the peer-to-peer support. They want growth. They don't just have grit, they have the growth mindset. So we peer-to-peer, we have everything from just networking to peer-to-peer coaching to bringing in speakers. It's an opportunity with people with the same mindset. And another thing, thinking yin and the yang, there's the business, there's the strategies, there's the tips, the tricks, but it's the mindset and the habits and what kind of person do you have to be? What does your life look like behind the scenes? That is what allows us to implement all the strategies. The strategies don't mean nothing if you don't implement them. So it's a great way to get peer support to do that, in the mindset and skill set and the habits required to do it well.
I love that. And I know when we get towards the end of this episode and we try to get very practical and we talk about strategies, you're going to give us a very holistic strategy that kind of speaks to what you just said, that to be an abundance growth minded person it's not just about business. It's not just about your mind, right? It's you're a person, right? And so there's a lot that goes into that to facilitate that, or to make that available, I guess, right? Like to make that possible. So we'll get to that for sure. So I'm curious. So I've shared in a very deep dive, I think it was episode 1, kind of my history, and we're obviously not going to spend an hour unpacking your history, but I had someone facilitating that and coaching me through this episode as basically a guest host on my very first episode. And what we really uncovered was where my values came from, right? And she had this connection, like, your values often come from vacuums, like these things that you experience in your younger life really inform the things you crave and you get energy from and that you look for in your adult life. And that was very true for me. And so this idea that like people tell me I'm a really good connector and I'm like very relational, like, and we talked about in that episode, like the vacuums, the loneliness, isolation, abuse, and things I dealt with earlier. So I feel like at least in the aspect, Ben, of like being a connector and bridge builder and like seeing so much value in people and then having the insight to connect the right people at the right time, those are very strong values. And it's really what all 3 of your aspects of your businesses are really built on. Can you take us back a little bit, like whether it's your business journey or even your childhood, but do you see the origins of why you love this whole connection game as much as you do today?
Yeah, so I love everything about this, and I want to listen to that other episode. I've never done this before. I try to just integrate it, but let me just give the listener the cheat code, and then we'll work backwards. So
Yeah.
if we were to look at 3 values: growth and or fulfillment, wisdom, connection and or belonging, fun, which actually fulfillment's in the fun category. I used to think I valued fun, but I really valued fulfillment. So growth, connection, and fulfillment or fun. So when I was a kid, I literally had a basketball jersey for every single day of the week. Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Reggie Miller. And I was a 3-point champion in like high school. Like I was really good at basketball, but I was the shortest boy in my class. I was like tiny. In elementary school, I was literally the second shortest person behind a little girl named Olivia Lee. So what happens when you're small at a young age and, your whole family played basketball, you want to be a basketball player, but you're tiny. You get pushed around a lot. You get beaten up. You get bullied. I was a very creative type. I was a very inward and introspective, but quiet type. So I was kind of weird at a young age. I didn't have a ton of friends. I wasn't the class clown. So going back to those values, I didn't realize this at the time, but that's where that growth mindset was coming from. It was literally coming from the fact I was small. And not only was I small, I was bullied, so I would make myself smaller. I remember a specific moment where I'm sitting at we're in public, we're at like a fast food restaurant. I'm sitting at the table and no fault to them. Like my father had a drinking problem, a little bit of drug use. My mom had a neurological disorder, which caused some body deterioration. My brother got diabetes at a very young age. And I'm sitting there and I'm seeing all of us, including me, completely slumped over at the table. We were slumped. No one taught me good posture per se. And not only was I small, I had made myself smaller to hide from the bullies and the people that were judging me. And honestly, like it wasn't even that bad. I was doing it to myself, but I
Yeah.
didn't realize that that was such a gift because I felt disconnected. I didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't big, but I wanted to do big things. And at a younger age than most, I got into personal development and I got into psychology and I became a communications major. I joke that I went to college for communications and psychology, not to change the world, just to figure myself out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's awesome.
one thing I skipped, and I'll just breeze over it, around later in high school, being a weird kid, I found the music industry because there was other unique creative types. And that was the first time I felt like I belonged. That was the first time I found a tribe because we are all unique, we are all creative, and we loved music. We loved to have a good time and dance and like just play music and just like girls and the whole shabam. And that was the first time I felt like I was a part of a tribe. And I was handing out flyers. I was setting up at the time MySpace pages, then Facebook pages. I was running merch booths. Everybody had t-shirts for local bands that no one in the world has ever heard of because me and a few people were promoting like crazy. And now look what I get to do for a living. Like the quiet kid who felt disconnected, that was just handing out flyers because he likes a band, is now a loud marketer. Now I'm not the loudest, but my podcast reaches a good amount of people.
Yeah.
I'm now a marketer, but I didn't know what marketing was. I didn't know what promotion was. I didn't know who Seth Godin was or Elon Musk. I wasn't entrepreneurial, and I didn't even know I valued connection. I just felt disconnected. I didn't know I valued growth. I just wanted to be better. And I thought I valued fun, but the fun got me into drinking and bad situations. It's not that I wanted the fun. I just wanted the fulfillment. I wanted to be part of a tribe. I wanted to feel fulfilled and that I belong. And nowadays, I've actually been stepping back from fun because doing some self work and building a business, which not always, people don't always get what it takes to build a business, isn't always fun.
Yeah.
But it is fulfilling. So I'm going to stop there, and working backwards, if you understand what you value, you can go back in time and look at those reoccurring moments. I like to say a foghorn story, like someone who was negative or like made you feel like crap, like a bully or an alcoholic, and they aren't foghorns in every scenario, but you take those people that made you feel poor, and then you take the lighthouses, the people that made you feel great. My friend Brendan Gansmer, when he gave me my first CD, if you tell those stories aligned with the values, you've got stories for a lifetime. You don't have to make anything up because you've lived them.
Man, I love that. And when you go back and listen to the episode I was referencing, you're going to find a lot of commonalities. So
Cool.
my dad was an alcoholic as well, and mine was less. I was probably above average in height, but I was a weird kid in the sense that like I lived out in the country. Even if I had friends at school, no one could visit. We never went. I didn't play any sports because we didn't have any access to it. I never went on vacation like at all until I was in college. Like I was just very isolated, and I think because of that, I felt awkward at school. Now the thing that I always did have in my corner, and the one kind of word of affirmation that everyone consistently gave me was that I was smart, right? So I took on this identity that like I'm good at academics, so there's something there. And so for me, like you said, you didn't intend to be an entrepreneur. Like I don't honestly think I ever heard the word entrepreneur until I was like out of college. It was not even like a thing. I didn't know a single business owner personally. I mean, I'm sure I was like at the grocery store and the owner was there, but I didn't make that connection. But like it was not part of my family. It was very blue collar family. And so, but you were talking about like the foghorns, but then also like the when you go back and you think about like the pivotal positive influences, like, yeah, for me, like I took this like smart idea, like the smart identity. I was like, oh, well, maybe I should be an engineer. My dad was a laborer. So basically he was doing all the crap work, and he used to talk bad about the engineers who just sat in khakis in the air conditioning, right? And I'm like, well, I want to do that. So I went in, I applied for engineering school. I ended up getting a full scholarship. And so the reason I bring this up is they plugged me into this community. They called us Chancellor Scholars. There's 20 people in my class of not just engineers, but of the whole class. They got a full ride academic scholarship, and we got connections with the chancellor. It was like a pretty cool deal. And now in hindsight, I'm like, that changed my life. Like those being in that circle of 20 and having this identity as like one of the like premier students, if you will, and having access to the chancellor and from the background I came from, was amazing. And I think like everyone at my wedding party was from that group of 20, or like all my roommates were from that group of 20. And it was like such an influential community. And I think back for me, like one of my values is community, because I had it very little growing up. And then like when I got immersed into that and as my first college experience, I was like, holy crap, like this, like it's so cool. Like I get so much energy from it. And I can think, in that episode, we talk more about it, but like I can think about the many times that I've been put into a circle of community, and it's like changed my life. Like those are all my 10x leap moments when I look back. And now, the thing I love to do is give that to others. So I lead mastermind groups and coaching groups. So we're very kindred spirits in many ways, Ben. I know we have a lot of differences too. I I have a guitar in the background of my office here, but have no idea how to play it. It's aspirational. I have no musical talent. I've never had any strong ambition to even go into that world. Whereas that was like a big part of your story. So anyway, I just had to share all that because the final fun fact I want to share to riff on what you said.
Yeah.
You said growth, connection, and fun/fulfillment. So on like the about page of my website, I have 6 values. Those are 3 of them. And what's really funny is this whole brand, it's now 7-figure leap, right? The leap is a play on like quantum leaps and the fact that you can make huge, fast progress through relationships. And so I settled on that. But the finalist with that was 7-figure fun. And the idea was like, marketing should be fun. Your business should be fun. But then I dropped that because I'm like, it's really not all the time. But and to your point, you gave me a much better word. It's fulfilling. Like it's not always fun. Sometimes it really sucks, but it's still fulfilling because you know you're going towards a bigger purpose. So that was awesome. Thank you for kind of painting a picture of your background and why you do what you do today. And got a good sense. We didn't talk. Let's talk just a little bit about your agency, since that is the thing that butters your bread the most. So, like, who do you love to work with in that? And what do you do for them?
Part of me feels like it's the boring stuff. The biggest compliments I get is when people are like, Ben, you've done X, Y, and Z, or I was in a dark moment and your podcast gave me grace. Like, I don't even know what you do. I love when people say that because it's not my job to pitch myself. Yeah. I didn't even really know what I was doing when I started my business. I got let go. I was a sales executive for a more corporate firm. And I got let go during the pandemic. I was first one in, first one out. I had started there 5 months ago and then COVID hit. So book of business momentum program I was building was completely stripped from me. Book of business for my prior company was no longer mine. So I was starting from scratch. And I was just wondering, the reason I started Real Business Connections, it was originally Rochester Business Connections. I'm from Rochester, New York. I thought I am a minnow in an ocean of sameness. I'm just a marketer who's starting during a pandemic. That's like every marketer ever trying to build an online business. If my city doesn't like what I do, I have no business being in business. So I started super local Rochester Business Connections because I wanted some. I wanted connections. And on LinkedIn, a friend request is called a connection request. So LinkedIn was my platform of choice. So I was going to put all my love and energy into LinkedIn. And I thought it's a connection request. I'm looking for connections. I want to, Music Ben is unemployed. Biz and non-essential, just to mention that. Non-essential.
Non-essential during the pandemic, yeah.
Business Ben is insatiably curious and is a connector and wants to learn and make connections. So I started Balbert Marketing. I started offering all the same kinds of services that I did at my prior firm: web design, SEO, SMM, content marketing. And I used the podcast, Rochester Business Connections, as my networking tool to get in touch with local leaders. Leaders know other leaders, business owners know other business owners. Did a 22 episode launch in November of 2020. That's an episode a day every Monday through Friday. In those 22 episodes, you were talking about year 20. Those 22 led to friendship, business partners, clients. And by now, like if you were to look at the seeds of the relationships, a couple $100,000 in income coming from those 22 first episodes. Now, I was selling the websites, the SEO, the SMM, et cetera, but all my clients were coming through a similar strategy of yours, really, podcasting. I was hosting a podcast, I was guesting on shows, and I was building out a LinkedIn strategy, and I got really good at kind of social selling on LinkedIn. So a lot of people had to pinch me. I still haven't marketed it at all. I'm starting to pivot. And this is really the future. We can talk about it more. I can do website and SEO, et cetera. But I've been specifically doing it for podcasters and thought leaders, legacy builders that want to create a big impact, but want to be able to drag and drop and not have to do every little thing, the ghostwriting, the social media. But again, I didn't pen to paper come together with a 10-part marketing plan. I just started selling the crap that I knew how to sell prior because I was good at it.
Hmm.
And more the vision of where I needed to go. I had to be pinched so many times to go in that direction. Um, and again, like when you're elevating legacy builders, that's part of why I started Grow Getters Only, to have them as speakers in my community. Not everybody listens to podcasts. So I thought podcast is one way, social media is another way, and then starting a community is another way. But at the end of the day, it's just amplifying good things, man. And I never thought I'd be a podcast marketer. I don't like calling myself a podcaster. I'm just a dude with a mic. But I'm making a living out of it, which is pretty cool.
This is really cool. Yeah, again, so many similarities. But yeah, when I left engineering, I just kind of like did whatever the heck I could to make money, right? So I was doing websites, Google My Business profiles, Facebook ads. And I was like, I know a little bit about a lot of stuff, and so I just kind of started doing quote unquote marketing consulting, mostly for local businesses. It's actually very similar. I wasn't smart enough to like start a podcast and do it in a scalable way. But yeah, so it led to a partnership, which led to my e-commerce brand, Fire Creek Snacks, which in the pandemic, which was also many people. I feel like the pandemic, 2020 has come up in every interview I've done. It's like everyone has some major pivot through that, right? And so for me, that's when I discovered podcast guesting. And then now, fast forward almost 4 years, like now I'm known as like a podcast guesting guy, which again, I would never like attach that to my own, that shingle to myself, but that's how people introduce me now. And it's good because it definitely pays the bills when, when you're known for something and you have a specific result that you can help people achieve.
I want to add one thing real quick because I was on a podcast and someone built this scenario. He's like, you're at Madison Square Garden. You've accomplished all your goals. You're giving your keynote. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do a keynote at MSG. Like, I like being behind the scenes, but the realization I've had over time is he said, like, what would you talk about this? I'm like, I would talk about, I guess, whatever I had to talk about, because podcasting or LinkedIn or the platform of choice is not what's important.
Yes.
What's important is the content and the people you're helping with the content. So would I do a keynote at MSG? I would be scared to death, but I would do it if I knew that it would create an impact. So it doesn't matter if it's a podcast host or a podcast guest or a blogger or a writer or a videographer or a graphic designer. The medium is not what's important. It's really the message, which is most important, in my opinion. We just happen to find it through podcasting.
Amen. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny, people sign up for my group coaching program and it's called the Podcast Profits Accelerator, and it's about podcast guesting. And like the very first slide on the very first day, I'm like, this isn't about podcast guesting. I mean, like we do build a system. That's the vehicle. I mean, I'm not going to say, let me, build a 6-figure marketing channel with podcast guesting and then not deliver that. We do, but like we immediately get into questions like, what's the transformation you provide? Who do you really serve? Well, and we use story brand and like, what's your real message? Right. And the thing that everyone says they get the most value out of is like clarity. It's like, oh, wow, I'm like so clear now on what I'm doing. And then you become kind of a magnet for opportunity. And of course we do the, amplification and the things with the podcast. But I just love what you shared. Like there's all these different mediums. The mediums will change over time. But the core is building those bridges, having the connections, having a clear message, having value that you can give into the world. So whether you're at Madison Square Garden or you're on the little 7-Figure Leap podcast, you have something to share. I do want to talk about the future, and I think this plays into it. So a clarifying question that I think I know the answer, but I want to hear you describe it a little more. You kind of got these 3 circles, right? You got the podcast, you got the Grow Getters Only community, and then you've got your agency, Albert Marketing. How much do these function as Venn diagrams? Like, do they feed each other? Are they intended to be like a flywheel? Because you mentioned like you get clients from one to the other. It seems like there's some people that would fit into at least 2, if not all 3 camps. So I'm curious how you see the 3 relating to each other, if you have thought about that, and maybe that will kind of push us towards looking at your future vision and where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, I won't bore you with all the small side things I've started and built, and in some cases never even launched. Um, 2 big words for me in 2024 were clarity and intention, because I did a lot of throwing things at the wall, and a lot of it didn't stick, but a lot of it did. And I couldn't get clarity or understand my intention or my purpose without, you said it, just kind of just getting your hands dirty, going blue collar, just going to work and figuring it out as you go. But now that I have better clarity on like what I'm trying to do, bridge from knowledge from the people who have it to the people who need it. Platform doesn't matter that much, but I have I have a podcast about connection. All of it is intertwined. And the one question I've been asking myself all of 2024 is this in alignment with who I am and who I'm becoming? Is this in
Wow, that's
alignment
the
with
question.
who
Who
I
I'm
am,
becoming, right? Yeah.
and who I am becoming? Because meeting the man I could have been is literally the most disastrous, scary thing that I could ever imagine. Meeting the man I could have been and being not even recognizing that individual is a scary concept to me. So yeah, I've tried a lot of things. We didn't even touch on speaking. I don't try to speak at a ton of gigs, but I will take that opportunity because it's going to feed into who I want to become and the message that I want to spread. So yeah, they all are completely intertwined. They're all completely aligned with my values. And all three of those categories, actually, Balbert marketing is drifting away a little bit. It's got my name in it. The first thing that someone said to me, my friend Jake, I said, I'm going to start a marketing company. I got an LLC. I didn't know I didn't need an LLC to start, but I got an LLC. I'm calling it Balbert Marketing. And my friend Jake said, no one even calls you Balbert. Which it doesn't matter. It's B Albert. I just
Yeah.
filled out the first thing that came to mind. Balbert marketing in the traditional online marketing services is actually a little bit drifting away because one, Real Business Connections is a better brand name. It's more scalable. I can build a team that doesn't have, I don't want to be attached to the brand my whole life.
Right.
So wow, I'm thinking out loud. Balbert marketing actually might not be part of that Venn diagram in the long term. I've actually been considering taking Balbert marketing and calling it Ben Albert is marketing and having that be the personal brand. But yeah, man, it's getting clarity and determining, is this in alignment with what I'm trying to accomplish? And Grow Getters Only and Real Business Connections are getting the most attention because they're in direct alignment with what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. So again, who knows? Because 3.5 years ago, it was like COVID and everything changed. But like, if you think like 3 years in advance and at least in your current mindset, realizing that you're becoming someone new in the process, like what would you either predict or hope for or pray for or dream about? Like what would be the 3-year version of your business, you think? If you could just show up and do X, that would be a dream. Like, what are you thinking now?
Yeah. I mean, I want to move the needle. Actually, I always want to emphasize the word actually. I want to actually move the needle on 1 million lives, one conversation at a time. And the reason the keyword is actually is, let's just use a 6-pack. Like I could post a picture of my body transformation and it'll get a little motivation, but it won't actually move the needle on their career. And if you move the needle even the slightest bit over a long enough time horizon, that person is in a completely different place because you move that direction just a little bit. So I want to actually move the needle on 1 million, but I'm even second guessing that because I can't track whether I got to 1 million.
Yeah, that's the tricky part, right? There's no tracking, especially with podcasts. I mean, how many people are listening to this or listening to your show or all the other opportunities? How many people are at TNC and maybe were in the room and weren't in the room, watched the replay, and then you start thinking of like the ripple effects of like, yeah, it's just I've had those kind of goals too, where it's like a number, and it was like, well, I had Chandler Bolt on this podcast with self-publishing, and he said something similar. And he's like, well, it would impact however many lives. And he's like, but really that's kind of BS because we can't measure it. We just want to have this many books published like by this year. And I'm like, well, that you can, that you can measure is how many, because they're in the book publishing business. So yeah, but I appreciate you being kind of open and like thinking out loud through this. Like, I think I
People like
said I
the
wanted this, but now that I think about it, I'm not really sure that that's the right thing. So that's totally
Well, I
cool.
mean, as many people in as quickly as possible and let that multiply in the compound interest. At the end of the day, people like hard numbers and hard goals. But the true answer that a lot of people don't like is I don't really care where I am in 3 years. I could, the sad answer is I could die on my car ride home. Who the frickin'
Right.
knows what God has chosen for me? So I don't care where I am in 3 years. I don't care where I am in 30 years. However, if I'm making decisions that are in alignment with what I value, who I am and who I am becoming, it doesn't actually matter where I am in 3 years because
Mhm.
I know I'll be in a good place. It doesn't actually matter if I get to 1 million or 10 million or 1 billion because I know that I created a better world. So I'm detached from goals. I know I'm getting kind of woo woo, but in a
No, you're
perfect
great.
world,
Yeah.
I'm just blissed out helping as many people as I can, just sailing off into the sunset, my friend.
And I love goals, but I'm actually very much in alignment with what you said. And I got an insight from what you shared. So it's kind of pointless to say, like, this is where I want to be in 3 years just for the sake of stating that, because you ultimately have very little control over it. Like you said, you could, who knows, all myriad of things could happen in the world
Yeah.
or to you or to whatever. However, you also said, as long as I'm in alignment with my values and I'm becoming a better person, and I'm like, I think the trick here, the key is, like, most people don't have enough clarity on their values, who they want to become, and what they're really all about, right?
Yeah.
And the tool that helps so many people get more clear on that is thinking 3 years in advance. Like, if I like take this current trajectory and like, what do I want to point at, realizing that when I actually get there in 3 years, it probably won't look anything like what I imagine, but it's a great tool. Visioning is a great tool to like come back to the present moment and be like, well, if I was going to become that version of what I'm at, like, I need to amplify these things about myself. I need to like get help with these things. I need to meet these types of people. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think it's a little meta, but I think it's a really
It is
good
meta.
way to think about this. Is like, the goal itself is kind of worthless, but thinking about the goal and getting clear on how you would ever get towards that goal is very valuable, because that informs a lot about your daily habits and things we're going to talk about here in the final segment. So thank you very much for, again, the history, the present, the future casting. I know I got a ton of insight in thinking through that with you. So at this point, we'll transition like the last 10 minutes or so here, Ben, and we just want to be practical, kind of turn the mic over to you, and just something that you're currently either working through, or something you teach, or something you've learned that you think would be particularly valuable to entrepreneurs listening in. It's basically a smart strategy session that I'm gonna let you lead. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Cool. And let's start off. You know what? I have my keychain right here. I have a keychain for people listening at home. It says, "There is no key."
Love it.
Now, there's a lot of keys, but in reality, it's a reminder that I don't think there's one specific, like, foolproof magic key to success, to fulfillment, to resilience. I believe there is no key. It's a combination lock.
Hmm.
And similar to a padlock at the gym or a safe, each and every one of us has our own unique combination. So people ask me all the time, how did you do X, Y, and Z? Or how did you do this? You touched on, we're workshopping it. I told you beforehand, I'm workshopping this because people ask me all the time, how do you do X, Y, and Z? And I remind them that it's a fingerprint. Like, there is no key, but I can tell you what I do. And then if you apply just a little aspect of each of these, I believe you're guaranteed success. So lots of B's. We'll go through this because we could do a whole presentation, whole podcast on
It's
just
cool.
this.
My whole framework is just a bunch of P's. So yours can be B's, but yours actually makes more sense because your name is Ben. Mine is not like Paul or anything.
Oh, I forgot it. So I'm going to write down Ben, and then we'll write down
Ben is the
B,
first B.
being, biz, body, brain, and bond.
Hmm.
Now, another thing I believe, that's another B, is that success, resilience, confidence comes from memories of winning. So if you can win these five, just these five, you're going to be more successful just in the fact, and this is biz, you're going to be more successful because you have evidence that you hold yourself accountable and you do the non-negotiables. Now, these are my big 5 non-negotiables: being, really quickly, something that makes you better and not bitter, whether that's prayer, whether that's meditation, whether that's breath work, whether that's getting into the sun early, whether that's a moment of silence, detaching. The last thing you want to do is wake up and then just touch your phone. You're going to get triggered. So something that helps your being. We're going to do biz at the end. Something that helps your body. Now, that is something, body is the most difficult one because we're met with distractions and, I mean, food. We have to eat 2 to 3 times a day. So, but really, like, let's just say the morning to keep it simple, but it doesn't have to be in the morning. You wake up and you just do something that gets the blood flowing. I like to joke, do what you didn't do when you were sleeping. So what
Yeah.
didn't you do when you were sleeping? You didn't drink water, you didn't stretch, you didn't get the body moving. So get up, drink some water, get the body moving. That's body. Brain is something that's, again, let's say, does it make you better or does it make you bitter? Does it stimulate your brain or does it make your brain depleted with garbage? I used to think brain, I got down this cycle, the self-help cycle of consume, 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 consume. It's not always nonfiction, even though I encourage it. It can be creative fiction. It can be something creative and unique. It can be playing guitar. It can be drawing, something that stimulates either the left or right side of your brain. Do that every single day. And again, it's there's no key. It's what stimulates you, what makes you better and not better. I think that's the key, actually. Not to say there is a key. Does it make you better? Do that. Does it make you bitter? Don't do that. But it's going to be different for everybody. Bond is something that is my favorite because I think people are busy and they neglect it. And that's just like making sure at least once a day you have a bonding opportunity. And it can be everything from a coffee chat to spending time with your family. Or if you're looking at business development, you pick up your phone. I learned this from Jordan Harbinger. You scroll down at the bottom of your emails, the bottom of your DMs, the bottom of your text messages, whatever platform you use. You're going to see people you met at a conference and haven't spoken to in years. You're going to see people that you used to work with that you need to follow up with. Or you're going to see that your friend from college is married and just had a child. And not only did you not know about the marriage, you didn't know about the child and you didn't congratulate them yet. So what you're going to do when you see that is you're going to send them that congratulations. You're going to send them that hello. You're going to make an observation. If you do that one time a day, now more actually equals more as long as it's quality. So 10, 50 a day is even better. But one time a day is 365 a year, is 3,600, 500 every 10 years, is in the tens of thousands over your lifetime. And imagine the ripples of goodness you can create just with one message a day. Now imagine if you did 10, but just one a day. Hold yourself accountable to do one reach out a day. That'll strengthen your bond. And biz, we already talked about it all episode. If you do all these other things, you tell me, the listener, or you can tell me, Dustin, if you do all those things, is your business going to be better? And people might say, well, I like to take time off on the weekends. I'm not focused on business 24/7 like you, Ben. That's insane. That's focusing on business. Knowing when to rest is focusing on your business as well. So knowing when to take a break, knowing when to do income producing activities. If you can focus on your business, and rest counts as focusing on the bigger part of your business, you do all 5 a day. Again, iterate. There's no key, but that stuff works for me.
Yeah.
That unlocks success for me every single day, Dustin, and makes
I
me a more
absolutely
confident
love
person.
it. So especially since you kind of ad hoc'd it, it's really good. It's also what's funny, and I don't know how these will get published. Probably yours will be right after. But I interviewed someone this morning, Julie Lowe, who just wrote a book called A Few Good Habits, and she kind of had this core 4 habits, and it was not dissimilar to these, right? Because we all know these are really the core things we should be doing to be better humans. But what I like about the way that the context that the order that you went through it in the context is like, hey, if you're an entrepreneur and like one of the things you really value is growing your business, you have to be doing the other 4 things too, because otherwise you like end up with a really screwed up life. Your business actually grows more slowly. And so when I was reflecting on these as you were saying them, so being, body, brain, bond, biz. and was thinking about my own daily habits and the things I've really focused on, I'd say the last 18 months is this coaching business has, really grown. And I had another episode about the 10x leap that we made in this business. And so, yeah, like I do all these things like, so the being in the body, in the morning, like I drink a lot of water when I wake up, and I do like 60 seconds. So I might be jumping jacks, push-ups, just like something to like get the blood pumping. Right. And then brain, like something we picked up in COVID was Wordle. A lot of people played Wordle for a while and they probably gave it up. But I've played Wordle every day since COVID, and my daughter and my wife do, and we have a group text. And every day we all share our Wordle. So it's just like it's something I do in the morning. It's just like a little puzzle, right? It takes literally a few minutes. Unless I'm having a bad day, then it might take me 10 minutes. But it's just like a little thing, but it's a very consistent habit to get kind of my brain going. And Bond, I would say Bond, I think that my biggest takeaway from our interview was actually what you opened with, which was like just like very simple tactical thing that you could do. Like people are listening to this, they probably listen to podcasts in general. And so why don't every podcast you listen to, for every 45 minutes that you're going to take to listen to a podcast, take 2 minutes and then like thank the host and thank the guest and let them know what you learned. And imagine how many cool relational seeds will come from that. And as Ben shared, like start with Ben. Like if you're listening to this, like send Ben a note and he's going to tell you how to do that in a minute and connect with people. Like that's such a simple way to bond. And it will I 1000% guarantee if you do that, your business will grow as a result. It won't be immediate, but like the relationships that you form through that process, because, again, this is a version of what I've done to really grow my own business. I love that. And then in biz, like we're entrepreneurs, we're probably focusing most of our energy, if we're honest, on growing our business. But as I shared on the previous episode, the ironic thing that I've had to fight tooth and nail with my own mentality is like, to grow faster, you actually need to rest more. Yeah. And like having a 10x sleep actually requires way more like white space and emptiness on your calendar and days off and things that like you think you got to just push and push and push. But actually most of the growth, and I find that most of my best sales days are when I'm like playing golf with my daughter or like on a ruck adventure kind of out by myself. And I show back up to reality. I'm like, oh, I made sales. But the days I'm like pushing, doesn't happen, right? And so, and I think there's a lesson in that. So yeah, I love that, man. Being, body, brain, bond, biz.
Yes, sir.
And to cap it all off, the overarching theme is better, not bitter. If you're trying to think of behaviors and habits that you want to pick
My name's Ben, so that's.
And your name's Ben. This is like amazing. There's so many B's. Like I don't know. There's like
I know
8
I'm long-winded, but just one sentence. None of that is rocket science. None of that is actually new advice. I'm just doing it, and Dustin's just doing it, and other people aren't. We're not any more special. And honestly, I only put that together so I could have a keynote, but it's not new advice. It's stuff we already know, but we don't take action. And it's as simple as sending that DM when you listen to the show, taking a little bit of action each day is all it is.
Yeah, I mean, people are familiar with like the Eisenhower Matrix, or I don't know. There's all these books, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Somewhere in there, there's a phrase that like the actual most important things in life, or the things that will give you the most progress, are not urgent but important. Right? You have urgent, important, urgent, not important. There's like a little quadrant. But if everything you listed there is really easy to do, and it's really easy not to do. And that's why the magic isn't actually doing it. Like, 5 minutes a day of exercise, one thing a day to make sure your brain's activated, one reach out or connection to bond. Like the people who do that are the ones, that are going to win, because that there's a true compounding interest factor with it. So I love that, Ben. So how can people get a hold of you, and what should people do next if they like what they've heard and they want to be part of your Venn diagrams of your 3 parts of your business?
What they should do next is, I wouldn't be here without Dustin. So the easiest thing you can do, you already have it pulled up, hit subscribe. I'm going to ramble so you have time to do it. Hit subscribe, hit 5 stars, hit a like, bonus points if you leave a review, extra bonus points if you send him a DM. I'm easy to find. Real Business Connections was done intentionally. You can type that in wherever you found this. or you can just Google it and you'll find me. So love on Dustin first and type in real business connections, and then it's really easy to find me.
You're the best. Yeah. So he's very active. I'm looking at his LinkedIn profile right now. Very active on LinkedIn. So Ben Albert on LinkedIn, Real Business Connections. Go listen to his podcast. Also subscribe. You can find my episode there if you want to hear more about what I was doing at that point in my life, which was probably 6-8 months ago. But yeah, I really appreciate that. So as my closing thought, call to action, do these things and start with Ben. Reach out to him, get to know Ben. He's an awesome guy, and obviously he's super well connected, and that's a big part of his values. And yes, selfishly, leave me a 5-star rating. This is a pretty new podcast. Ben knows that he's in the podcasting world for a long time. It really makes a huge difference. So whether you're on Spotify right now, or you're on your Apple app, whatever, wherever you're listening, there's literally like right below this episode as part of the show notes, there's some stars, and just hopefully it's 5. Hit a star rating, and then if you feel really touched, leave a short written review. Really moves the needle in letting people find the show. So Ben, thank you again, my friend. This is cool. I appreciate the amount of time you've given, but and we could talk for 3 times this long, and probably will over the course of this
is
year.
Already going to be a 2-parter.
I think it's going to have to be. This is good stuff. So, all right, man. Well, take care. Thanks again for your time, and thanks for all the value you bring to the world.